October 21st at the Moran Theater. Tickets at nationalukraineballet.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Become a listener supporter of this station today. Text News 89.9 to the number 44321. And thanks.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, the legal battle over books in Nassau County schools has come to a close, with 36 previously removed books going back on public school shelves. We talked to the lawyer behind the recent settlement about what it means and how we got here. Then, our election coverage continues with the second of two Duval County court contenders, attorney Shayla Lee. And our resident spaceman, Eddie Whistler, introduces us to the Milky Way's twisted sister, Andromeda. Join the conversation. You can reach us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can email questions or comments to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
I'm from NPR News in Washington. I'm Corva Coleman. Hezbollah militants in Lebanon have launched a ballistic missile at Tel Aviv today. This comes after hundreds of Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon have killed at least 564 people, according to the Lebanese health ministry. NPR's Vincent Nee reports.
Residents in Tel Aviv area were awoken by loud sirens this morning at around 6:30 local time. The Israeli military said the surface-to-surface missile was immediately intercepted by its air defense system, and there have been no reports of casualties or injuries. Hezbollah later said the attack was directed at the headquarters of the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad, which is near Tel Aviv. This is the first time the Iran-backed militia has fired a missile towards central Israel, according to the Israeli army. It is the latest sign of escalation in the region that many fear is inching towards a full-blown war. Vincent Lee, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
China says it has test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile that splashed down in the Pacific Ocean today. Beijing did not say where it fell or what route the ICBM flew. It was carrying a dummy warhead, but it was capable of carrying a nuclear payload. Tropical storm Helene is close to hurricane strength and churning off the coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Helene is expected to make landfall along Florida's Big Bend coast as a hurricane tomorrow. The National Hurricane Center says it may strengthen into a Category 3 storm. Stephanie Parks lives in Shell Point, Florida. She's getting ready to leave her home, she says, in preparation for yet another storm.
It just comes and goes, and I just deal with it. So this time I think it's going to be real fast moving, so hopefully I have a home to come back to.
Tropical storm Helene's maximum sustained winds are currently at 70 miles per hour, just shy of hurricane strength. Crypto companies are burning a lot of cash in this election, supporting both Democrats and Republicans in federal elections. But as NPR's Maria Aspen reports, when it comes to the presidential election, former President Donald Trump is crypto's biggest convert.
3 years ago, former President Trump was pretty clear on his feelings about cryptocurrency.
Bitcoin, it just seems like a scam.
That was Trump on Fox News in 2021. But this year, Trump is running for president again on a very pro-crypto platform. He's gotten a lot of endorsements and millions of dollars of donations from crypto investors and founders. And he's joining their ranks. Last week, Trump and his sons launched a crypto business called World Liberty Financial. But now, Vice President Kamala Harris is also chasing the crypto vote. At a fundraiser this weekend, she signaled more support for what she called innovative technologies, including digital currencies. Maria Aspen, NPR News, New York.
This is NPR.
It's now 4 minutes after 9. This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Clay County is getting ready for the impacts of Helene. Emergency Management Director Tim Devon says the county is expecting the storm to bring more gusty winds rather than flooding.
We expect to see downed trees and power lines as well as debris. Please take this time to secure any loose items and debris around your house and prepare for any power outages.
Clay County District schools are closing both Thursday and Friday, and all Board of County Commissioner offices will close at noon today and will stay closed Thursday and Friday. Officials are urging residents who live in mobile homes, RVs, and older homes to evacuate to one of the 5 shelters opening at 6 p.m. due to the threat for tornadoes. North Florida Land Trust has bought 2 properties in Clay County near its Milam Preserve and Gold Head Branch State Park. The property next to Milam Preserve is 18 acres, while the other is just over 51 acres and situated between the preserve and the state park. The Land Trust is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to protecting the area's natural resources. The 2 properties were sold for a combined $970,000. And for this afternoon, temperatures should get to about 87 degrees, breezy from the southeast. Tonight, a 60% chance of showers and thunderstorms move in, a low of 76, and tropical storm conditions tomorrow.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Workday. With AI at the core of its system, Workday is committed to delivering continuous innovation to prepare organizations for what's next. Workday, an enterprise platform for finance and HR rock stars.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, books are going back on the shelves after the Nassau County School District agrees to a legal settlement. We talked to the lawyer who brought the lawsuit about how the agreement was reached and what it signifies for similar battles elsewhere. Later in the program, we talked to County Court Judicial candidate Shayla Lee. But first, it is not yet a designated hurricane, but Helene will reach that stage very soon, and major impacts are expected. We're joined now by Florida Public Radio Emergency Network meteorologist Megan Borowski. Good morning, Megan.
Good morning to you.
What's the latest update for us, Megan?
So as we just heard, Helene is just shy of being a hurricane. Winds right now up to 70 miles an hour, but we are expecting this thing to intensify and rapidly intensify over the next 24 to 36 hours as it starts to accelerate northward through the Gulf of Mexico, likely strengthening into a major hurricane before it makes landfall along Florida's Big Bend sometime tomorrow evening. But we are expecting impacts far and wide from the core of this storm, particularly in the Jacksonville area. We could have outer bands arriving overnight tonight, tropical storm force wind gusts arriving tomorrow morning. And then on top of that, heavy rainfall, about 2 to 4 inches of rain, and tornado risk as well for us tomorrow.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, this more of a wind event for the folks living in the Northeast Florida area and Southeast Georgia area, or rain also concerning?
I would say be concerned for both. We have several hazards from the storm, even storm surge, 1 to 3 feet. So that is not the worst of it by any means, but 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. Rainfall, 2 to 4 inches widespread. Locally, higher amounts will be possible. We do have a tornado risk that continues to seem to nudge upward in terms of level of risk for us throughout the day tomorrow. And, wind is going to be a big problem as well. This storm is expected to have a very, very wide radius of tropical storm force winds, very far from the core of the storm. We'll have very, major hurricane strength winds to the west toward Tallahassee. But, especially in Jacksonville, we'll get those tropical storm force wind gusts. And even potentially, on the western periphery of Duval, we could get a couple of hurricane force gusts as well. When you couple that with 2 to 4 inches of rain, locally higher amounts, power outages will likely be a concern, especially throughout the day tomorrow into early Friday.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's hard to predict with real specificity, but if you were going to tell our listeners, a time to be off the road, for instance, Thursday into Friday.
I would say, make sure that you're wrapping up all your plans tonight. We will have a couple of bands start to arrive overnight, but by tomorrow morning, especially by midday tomorrow, I think is the very latest you should be on the road. But I would say by tomorrow morning, make sure you're hunkering down, you're in place, because conditions will continue to rapidly deteriorate. The core of the storm expected to make landfall tomorrow evening, so you'll want to stay in place through the overnight hours tomorrow into Friday morning.
All right. Well, Megan Browski, thank you so much for checking in with us this morning. We'll keep in touch and stay safe.
Absolutely. You too.
Let's turn now to the settlement reached on the issue of school books in Nassau County. I'm joined by attorney Lauren Zimmerman, who led the lawsuit opposing book removals and also represented the authors of one of those targeted books. Good morning, Lauren. Thanks for being here today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Is this settlement a victory?
Yeah, I think it's a watershed moment in the battle against book censorship across the country, and particularly in Florida.
So this is a agreement reached with the Nassau County School District. Tell us a little bit, for people who aren't familiar. First of all, who are your clients? Who are you representing?
So as mentioned, I was representing and continue to represent the authors of Tango Makes Three, which is a widely lauded, critically acclaimed children's book that tells the true story of the two male penguins that lived in the Central Park Zoo a decade or two ago, and during their time there formed an enduring pair bond, and together raised, incubated, hatched, and raised a baby chick named Tango. And so my two clients are the authors of that book. One, Peter Parnell, is a very successful playwright, and the other, Justin Richardson, is a well-accomplished children's psychiatrist. And they wrote the book together. They live in New York City together. They're a married couple, and much like the penguins in the story, are raising their daughter together in the city. In addition to those.
Hey, Lauren, I'm going to just play a little music here for a second. We're going to try to reconnect with you because we're having a couple of technical difficulties, but we'll be back in just a second. Lauren, I think we've got you back, and I apologize for those technical difficulties. So you were telling us about your client, the authors and the illustrator of Tango Makes Three. This book has not just been targeted in Florida or Nassau County, but in other places. And I think what's interesting is, it's a true story. It's not a fictional story about these two male penguins raising a chick. It actually happened at the Central Park Zoo.
That's right. Those two penguins, Roy and Silo, actually became national celebrities in our country when people learned about these two, I think they were termed at the time gay penguins that had formed this enduring pair bond in the Central Park Zoo, and then together incubated and hatched and then raised their baby chick, which the zookeepers named Tango. People flocked from all over the country to come to the Central Park Zoo and see them. So the book is absolutely a true story, and it tells the story of how they developed their pair bond and then how they together, incubated and hatched and raised Tango.
So this lawsuit that you brought, it was a federal lawsuit challenging the removal of this book and other books from the shelves in Nassau County. It is a lawsuit that was predicated in part on your belief that the school district didn't follow its own procedure in removing the book. So tell us about what they were supposed to do, in your opinion, and what they actually did do.
Sure. So first off, there are certain laws that are in place in Florida that require when a school board or any sort of agent that they dispatch or committee that they dispatch take any sort of official action, and particularly with respect to book challenges, that they do so in public, that they notice and hold a public hearing where people from the community can come and weigh in and hear about what's happening. And of course, then the people making the decision can consider the community's views before making their decision. And here in that case, that didn't happen. All 36 books were removed behind closed doors. In fact, the decision wasn't even made public, or at least discovered, I think, until earlier this year when a local reporter reported on it. But people in the community didn't even know that these 36 books had been challenged and removed or restricted from the school library. In addition, the school board itself had a policy in place for certain steps that had to be taken in order for a book challenge to be lodged and considered. And those its own policy wasn't followed in the process.
And so one of the claims that they made when you challenged specifically for this and Tango Makes Three, they said that it wasn't getting checked out as the reason why it was removed from the shelves. Is that right?
Yeah, so what was interesting is, it was a right-wing political group that challenged these 36 books, and the challenge lodged by that group was called Citizens Defending Freedom. All 36 books they challenged on the basis that they were obscene and were inappropriate as a result to be in the public school library. Now, again, all this was done behind closed doors, so I don't exactly know how this all came about, but 3 of the 36 books that were challenged on obscenity grounds, the defendants in our case determined were not obscene and shouldn't be removed, or didn't contain obscene material and should not be removed on that basis. But instead of just denying the challenge and saying, you put forth this particular basis and the basis isn't legitimate, they said, well, we're still going to remove these books based on lack of circulation or reading, basically alleging that the books, weren't being checked out at all and therefore need to be removed. But when we issued several public information requests, it turned out that each of the 3 books had been being checked out in the last 5 years, and in a lot of instances, far more than other books in the library that had never been checked out at all, and yet still remained in the library.
And so that claim was just false?
I guess the term that I would use is that the claim was pretextual, right? We allege that they, based on animus, based on the challenge, they wanted to remove the books. And so the basis that they provided for the removal was pretextual, was not supportable, and not accurate. But it was what they used to explain their actions. So
I know you say that this happened out of the sunshine, maybe not with public awareness. I think that, we could say that there are parents who in good faith are concerned about what their kids are consuming or reading. And, in Florida particularly, there's been this big push for more parental involvement. Is that a sense that you have of what happened, that this was a parent-driven conversation that was happening at the grassroots level in Nassau County?
I have no indication of that. As I mentioned, the 36 challenges were lodged by a national, anti-LGBTQ right-wing group. The person who lodged the challenges, my understanding, doesn't even have a child in the school district. And so, as far as I know, there was no community concern regarding these 36 books. Instead, a public interest group decided that its views on what our children should be exposed to and what they should be able to choose to read, because remember, these are optional materials in the library. This group feels that it should be the one making that decision.
If you're just joining us, we are talking with Laura Zimmerman. She is the attorney representing the authors and parents who objected to books being removed in Nassau County. You can join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect at WJCT.org or reach out on social media. We have a call from Charles on the West Side. Good morning, Charles. Go ahead.
Good morning. Laura, I read an article in the Times-Union yesterday that in Texas, I guess the same group of book banners possibly is trying to get the same books that they're trying to keep out of the schools out of the public libraries in Texas. Are we prepared for a movement like that here in Florida, or do you think you could see it here?
Good question, Charles. Lauren.
So what I will say, and hello, Charles, is that challenges to public library books, not just school library books, have happened in the country already. So I'm not surprised. Could that happen in Florida? Absolutely. Whether we're prepared, I can't answer that. I think it'll depend on the nature of the challenge, the the district in which the challenge is brought, and of course how the challenge is handled. A lot of these are very fact specific, and there are guardrails and rules that are in place to ensure that people's First Amendment rights are protected, and it's a question of whether people ultimately follow those rules to ensure that First Amendment rights are not infringed upon.
So, Lauren, tell us what this settlement actually provides for in terms of returning the books to the shelves, and what, if any, acknowledgments or concessions the school district itself made.
So the settlement restores to the public school libraries all 36 books that were challenged and removed or restricted. It restores and Tango Makes Three back to its original condition, which meant that it was accessible to all ages and everyone in the library. And one of the statements that the defendants make in the settlement, which we think is very important, is that the book in Tango Makes Three has pedagogical value, is appropriate for all ages, and contains absolutely no obscene material. With respect to the other 35 books, 22 of the books were restored back to their original condition, just as Tango, with respect to whatever accessibility aspects or characteristics they had before. The Perks of Being a Wallflower is also being returned, though before the book was challenged, it was available to kids in 8th grade and up. Now it's available to kids in 9th grade and up. And then there are 12 additional books that are being returned, but are also in parallel undergoing a review process. But in the meantime, those books are restored and may be viewed by any student who's 18 or over who has parental consent to check out the book.
So the school district did not acknowledge any wrongdoing in as part of this settlement. Is that right?
That's right. The settlement doesn't have any particular admission about liability.
And there's no financial claim that's involved here.
No, and I mean, the plaintiffs never sought any sort of financial gain here. This was always about their First Amendment rights and the First Amendment rights and, freedom of information for all students. There was no kind of financial incentive for anyone involved in this litigation on our side.
So tell us a little bit about your background. You're actually, you work in New York now as an attorney, but you're from Florida originally?
I am. I'm born and raised in Florida. I did all of my primary schooling in Florida, and the majority of my family still lives there. I began my career my legal career as a public defender in Brooklyn. So I feel innately I was trained to and have a strong sense of social justice and the protection of infringement of rights, particularly with respect to, underserved or minority groups. But since then, I clerked actually in the Southern District of Florida for a federal judge there, and then came to the firm that I'm at in New York called Selendy Gay, which is a litigation firm, and we handle a wide array of matters, anything regarding litigation, so any sort of conflict that requires legal intervention.
And so how did you first hear about the issues of books in Florida? Were you following the news, or was it you were involved just kind of once you became representative of these clients?
Well, I certainly been, following the general, beginnings of the waves of book banning. But I think I particularly, when this all began, was really paying attention to what's, now known as or has been dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. As I said, I'm from Florida and my family is still there. And so that passage there of that law was certainly troublesome to me and something that I was following. And a lot of the book restrictions and bannings we've seen, at least initially, stemmed from the passage of that law.
And so I think what's interesting, and some other people have pointed this out, but some of the books that have been on this targeted list and removed from shelves, things like The Kite Runner or The Diary of Anne Frank, were actually required reading at one time in some Florida classrooms.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the books, even including the 36th issue in my case, were written by or literary luminaries, and are books that, until recently, I think people thought were, very important aspect of anyone's education, whether you're, a student, a child, or an adult. So certainly, when I'm in conversation with lots of people about the rash of book restrictions and bannings we've seen, people are often really surprised by the books that are listed in these banning cases.
And so you have other clients, other pending cases. Can you give us some sense as to the larger picture? in Florida or in the country right now in terms of where cases like this stand?
I mean, I guess what I would say is, there are several book censorship cases being litigated throughout the country. Litigation, for better or for worse, is often a slow process. The majority of the cases are still in their very beginning stages. And as a result, the law is really kind of, just beginning really to develop around these issues. And in part, that's because this wave of book censorship is somewhat new to us. This is not something our country has been known for. And so while there certainly are, legal case law and guardrails in place, there are new kind of instances coming up that, courts haven't quite seen exactly before. And so the battle is ongoing, and this settlement is just, one marker, one moment in that battle. I think it's an important moment because it sends several messages about what is and is not appropriate or legal to do with respect to book challenges and book censorship. But it's certainly an ongoing process.
So I want to note that the Nassau County chapter of Citizens Defending Freedom, which was the group that initially lobbied to have these books removed, has said it is disappointed by this settlement agreement. The executive director of that organization in Nassau County called it a dark day for Nassau County schools. And he said that he has also asked the governor to step in, to remove the school board, to remove the superintendent in Nassau County, and also notified the Nassau County sheriff, quote, that they are distributing materials in violation of Florida's child obscenity laws. What, if any, involvement would you have in negotiating those complaints that have been filed either with the governor or with the sheriff's office? Can you give us some sense as to what we could anticipate from those complaints?
I cannot. I'm not involved in that, and I certainly can't anticipate how, I guess, Florida officials will react to, a settlement, by the way, that was also reached in the Sunshine pursuant to Florida Sunshine rules in terms of the ability of the defendants and the school board to enter the settlement agreement.
And I know you say that the settlement includes this statement, that there was no obscene material in Tango Makes Three, and that these other books were deemed appropriate for, students to access. But Florida has broadened its definition of, forbidden sexual content in statute. Did that statute come into play when you were reaching this legal settlement with the school district? Like, was that the law at issue that they were basing their claims on?
Yeah, my understanding is the challenge was based on the obscenity statute. So that kind of broadened definition that was included. But even then, I mean, the law doesn't say, if there's still an analysis that has to be done of each material, of each book, and you have to look at the book and the material within the book, and as a whole, just because there might be one mention of a sexual act that might not be sufficient under the obscenity statute to remove the book. But yes, that is what the special interest group cited as their basis, and we discussed in our complaint how kind of these evolving laws in Florida and across the country have led to people filing challenges of books based on those laws, whether they're reading the laws rightly or wrongly. That's I think for the local officials, that's really in their hands to determine.
We've got a call from Ricky on the north side. Good morning, Ricky. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask how the opinion of the governor and the legislature took that as the action of the removal of those books and then putting them, and then now allowing them to go back on the shelf. In other words, is the governor in favor of those committees taking those books out of the school library and now out of the public library? That's my question.
Whether the governor favors it. Lauren, do you have thoughts about that?
Sorry, the question was whether the governor favors the removal of books.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't really speak to what the governor favors, and I don't know if he has any opinion, particularly with what happened in Nassau. But I think we can say that the Florida legislature has created laws through which book books and school materials can be challenged.
Is there anything instructive in this settlement agreement that you reached for other school districts that are involved in these challenges, or does it send any message to other Florida counties?
Yeah, I think there are kind of several messages and lines in the sand that the settlement draws. First, it establishes that special interest groups should not and cannot make the decision for what students in a particular school district or really anywhere should be reading. That's not a decision that should be made by special interest groups. It also speaks to the dangers of serial filings, which we're seeing across the country, where one group or one person, regardless of whether they're a community member or have a child in the district, file, large swaths of book challenges, and the importance of looking at those book challenges and not accepting them whole cloth, particularly when they come from, what is being termed as a serial filer. The other really important item, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, is that pretextual reasons for removing books or violating authors and students and parents' First Amendment rights won't be countenanced. There has to be a legitimate reason for censoring a book, and pointing to, pretextual reasons is not going to fly, for lack of a better way of putting it. And this lack of circulation, leading, pretext that was used in Nassau has been used in other places. It was recently used in a case in the Fifth Circuit that, at least at the initial stages, the Fifth Circuit has rejected. So, each time a new pretextual reason is used, I think it serves as a warning that it will be challenged. And if it can't be supported under the facts, hopefully the books will be restored.
Well, Lauren Zimmerman, thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and for spending time on this issue.
Absolutely. Up next, we ask local public defender Shayla Lee why she's vying to become Duval County. Candidate conversations this election season with the final contender for Duval County Judge Group 9. I'm joined now by public defender and judicial candidate Shayla Lee. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Ann?
I'm great. Thanks so much for being here, Shayla.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I greatly appreciate it.
So your opponent, Matthew Lufrano, was on yesterday's First Coast Connect on Tuesday. I'm not sure if you had a chance to listen or if you have any thoughts about the case that he made for his own candidacy.
Actually, I have not had a chance to listen. I am currently still working, so I've been very busy. So I have not had a chance to listen to his broadcast.
So I think big picture, he says he's got the most experience and is therefore the most qualified to be a Duval County judge. There's just the two of you in this race. What is your feeling about your qualifications, and what's your case for being our next county judge?
Sure. So I believe I'm definitely qualified, and I do have the experience. It may not be the same number of years. However, I think my experience is a lot broader, being that I've done some child dependency work, I've done some private practice, I'm doing criminal defense. And so all of those things together, I think, give me a very unique perspective that I don't think is currently represented on the bench. And so I'd like to bring that to the Duval County Court bench, and I do believe I'm prepared for that role.
So you're currently in the public defender's office. A lot of our judges, as I noted yesterday, come from the prosecutor's office,
Correct.
Not very often from a criminal defense background. Now, your opponent is also a criminal defense lawyer, so you're similar in that respect. What do you think someone who comes from a criminal defense background, like how would they be a different kind of judge than somebody who comes from a prosecutorial background?
Sure. So I think when you're a prosecutor, obviously you're focused on the particular mission, like of representing the state, and you're zoned in on finding those things that are going to help you prove your case. As a public defender, I'm doing that, but I'm wearing multiple hats, right? Because I need to be able to tell my client how is it possible for the state to actually prove their case, right? So I'm reviewing the same evidence that they are, but I'm also concentrated on making sure that my client's rights are being protected. And a lot of times people don't think about that aspect of it when they're so focused on getting the conviction. And so it's important to make sure that the client's rights are being respected. And in addition to that, I think as a public defender, a lot of times we take on a little bit of a social justice role as well, almost like a social worker, where there is something here happening with my client, and maybe getting to the root of that problem will assist my client not only with this case, but making sure that they don't come back again with a different case or under different circumstances. So, as a public defender, again, I'm wearing these different hats and bringing all of those things together. And so, I think that that's what brings a different perspective to the bench. And I think that it's important that people understand that.
And so, if you're elected, how do you think that background of yours would inform how you run a courtroom and how you interact with lawyers and defendants?
Sure. So my background, like I said, is deeply rooted in the people, right? So coming from child dependency, a lot of times, again, I'm working with families to try to figure out what's going on with this family, whether it's poverty, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's substance abuse. All of those things factor into how people come into the criminal justice system or how they just come into contact with the court system, period, right? And so I've been very particular about making sure that I don't forget the people, right? Because this is a huge system. The judicial system can be very intimidating for someone who, first of all, is already in a vulnerable state. You know, whatever has happened in their life, it's probably not a great thing, right? Either something has caused them to make a bad decision or there's something that's influencing them that they might not be able to control, like the substance abuse or the mental health. And so making sure that we don't forget the humanity of what we do. And also making sure that while we're following the letter of the law, we're not forgetting the spirit of the law, which is making sure our communities are safe and making sure people are protected, but also making sure that there's justice and that there's some compassion in doing that.
We're talking to Shayla Lee. She is the Group 9 Duval County judicial candidate for county court. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can call us at 904-549-2937, or you can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also reach out on social media. And so we kind of discussed briefly yesterday as well that, you know, a county court judge hears misdemeanor cases, not felonies, and civil cases that are under $30,000. You also assign bail and decide whether to issue bond. And because you're handling misdemeanors, a lot of times those cases will not be the high profile cases that we are reading about or seeing on the television. But sometimes they're high profile. You know, there
Yes,
are
they can
occasions,
be.
right? And you will we'd have to make decisions in a very perhaps intense media and political environment about whether to grant someone bond.
Right.
How would you make those decisions? I mean, how would you manage in the limelight, and how would you, make those decisions based on the law and your reasoning and not maybe public sentiment?
Right. And so I think it's important, even when there are high profile cases, to focus on the case and the people and the facts that are in front of you, right? It's not about what's being said in the media. A lot of times when I listen to stories about, news pieces about different cases, what I hear on the news versus what I'm seeing in the courtroom doesn't always add up, right? Because there's a certain, media is there for a reason. They're not just there to inform, they're there to entertain. So there comes in some extra things with that. But with the law, we have to focus on the law. And so I think that's what we have to do. That's what I would do in those situations is you have to tune out the outside noise and focus on the facts that are being presented to you in the courtroom, not the things that you're hearing on the news, right? And I think if you do that, again, it brings the sense of humanity back to it when we're focused on the person in front of us and not necessarily the chatterings and media. When we're focused on that and applying the facts that you have to the law, I don't think you can go wrong in that instance, right? And so that's my focus is to make sure that I am paying attention to what's being said to people, so that takes a sense of patience, an even temperament so that you're able to receive information from both sides and weigh that information to decide what's the best thing for me to do in this particular instance with these set of facts and these people that are in front of me.
What do you think is the most important characteristic of a good judge?
I do think it is having that even temperament because, especially in county court, again, we're dealing with sometimes people that are representing themselves, pro se clients. So they are not necessarily well versed in the law. They didn't go to law school, but they do have the ability to advocate for themselves. So sometimes you have to be a little more patient in that circumstance, and not be so quick to, dismiss someone because they don't know the particular legal term that they're trying to convey to you. But if you understand what they're saying to you and you're giving that person that respect and that attention, I think that that's what's important. Again, humanity and focusing on the people, because, again, judges are public servants. And so it's important to remember that we're here to serve the community in that aspect. Even though we are dealing with law and legal things, it's still about the community and keeping the community safe and making sure that people have a trust and also a respect for the legal system.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you someone that came to the law young, that always wanted to be a lawyer when you grew up? How did you get to where you are now?
So I would say that I did grow up always wanting to be in the law involved. I had dreams of being a judge very young.
Really?
But I did not have a straight path there, if that makes sense. So there was definitely times where I switched it up in middle school. I went to Darnell Cookman here. I thought I wanted to be a a doctor, so I was in the medical magnet there. And of course, when I went off to college, I did public relations, and I thought about going into the PR field and things like that. But there's something about the law that's always called me back to it. And so once I had my oldest daughter, in that time point in my life, it was a reckoning of I need to focus because now I got this little person coming up and I got to be able to direct them in their life. And so that brought me back to, you know what, I've been running from this. I need to focus on the talent that God blessed me with, really is what it boils down to. And so that's what brought me back to the law and coming back here to Jacksonville. I decided to go to Florida Coastal. And I started in the child dependency. And actually, that started for me at Florida Coastal. I did an externship with Department of Children and Families. And I didn't even realize that area of the law existed until I'd done that. And so at that point, it really clicked for me, like, this is my purpose. This is what I'm here to do, is to help people. And the best way that I can help people is to use the talents I have. Like I said, advocating for people, being compassionate about people, and having a sense of wanting to make sure that I leave this world in a better place than I found it.
Child dependency cases are particularly harrowing, and you're dealing with cases where families are in crisis, children possibly suffering some kind of abuse, parents often in extremis themselves. Is there any experience that you had doing that work that stays with you, or that, affected how you look at the law and the job of either a lawyer or a judge?
Absolutely. I think it was always the overwhelming sense that I got from people, again, of exactly what you said. They were in crisis, and you could tell. It's almost like you could feel the sense of them being afraid of the unknown, right? Because, obviously we're stepping in, so possibly we've removed or separated a family who is not used to that, right? So now you've created an uncomfortable situation amongst people who are already in crisis. And so what I've learned from that experience, again, with people, is that you cannot help someone if you're not first meeting their needs, right? And so to just go into it with just the idea of, okay, by the letter, by the book, let's just close this case and, give them some services. And no, let's get to the heart of how these people came to get into this situation. And if we get to the root of the issues in that family and concentrate on making sure that we're addressing those things, that's how we make the community safer, right? Because if we're just going about regular days, just putting people in jail, taking children away from families, but not addressing how those people got to that situation, it's bound to happen again. And so that's what I think is the biggest thing. I know I say it a lot, but it is truly making sure that we're connecting with people on a level that makes sense to them so that they understand where we're coming from. And I think bridging that gap making sure that they understand why they're in this situation and what we can do to help make that situation better, by also still following the law, giving them some resources, but also when it's necessary, stepping in and saying, listen, we can't have this. This has to be corrected. And if we've already tried this route and it's not working, then we got to do something different. And so sometimes it does take a firm stance of saying, okay, enough is enough. But I think it's important that you're still able to do that with some sort of compassion.
We're talking to Shayla Lee. She is a candidate for county court judge here in Duval County. And you are welcome to join our conversation by calling us or emailing firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We got a message from Curtis on the north side. He said, can you provide examples of cases that will cross your desk as a judge? And of course, you're not allowed with any specificity to talk about how
Sure.
you would rule on anything, but what kinds of cases are you going to be seeing?
So, of course, with the criminal misdemeanor cases, a lot of those are traffic offenses, if I'm being honest. People driving without a valid driver's license. I see those countless times.
And
But
DUIs, I
also,
would
right,
guess, too, yeah.
DUIs, also more serious traffic offenses, leaving the scene of accidents. You're also going to see things like domestic batteries or batteries, that aren't domestic, but just with, people that are not necessarily living in the same household. So those type of cases. Outside the criminal aspect, though, there's also the small claims court where people are just in a dispute with someone about either a monetary thing or property. And then there's landlord-tenant issues that judges will also see. And one of the most important things I think that the county court judges do is they do sit in first appearance court. So when someone is arrested, it's typically a county court judge that's going to decide whether that person can have a bond, and if so, what that bond looks like. Can it be non-monetary? Will it be monetary? Will you put other conditions on it? And so those are very important real-time decisions that county court judges have to make. And I think that's one of the most important things that they do because it's involving the community, keeping the community safe, but again, also balancing the individual that's in front of me and balancing their rights. And how, if I do keep this person in jail without a bond, what kind of trickle of down effect will that have? If this person has a family, if this person has a job or a house, I've seen very quickly how someone who's not able to post a bond can then lose their job. And now what are their kids going to do? How are they going to make that rent payment? How are they going to pay that car note? So making sure that you're taking all of those things into consideration and making the best choice or the best decision that you can for that particular case in whatever circumstance that person is in.
And so there's been a movement nationally away from, cash bail bonds.
Absolutely.
I can never remember the difference, but away from cash bail, requiring, a cash deposit in order to bond out. Do you have a position on whether that's appropriate as a tool or perhaps could be used more than it is currently?
I think, in 2024, I think everyone should recognize that, some people just are not at a level where they can afford a lot of things, right? And so bond is one of those things that can be very expensive. And so what I think it's important to do is, again, case by case, take a look at the circumstances. If I were to give this person a non-monetary bond, is that also keeping the community safe, right? And I think that there are some instances where absolutely we could release someone, going back to what I said before, who is driving without a driver's license, right? Is it necessary to compound what's probably already a financial issue and a reason why they don't have the license to compound that by now giving them a bond? Or can we put a GPS monitor on this person or give them release them on their own recognizance and say, you're not permitted to drive? I think that those are things that we have to look at, but it has to be on a case by case basis because that's not going to apply to everyone, right? Because the person who's been driving on a suspended license 10 times maybe doesn't get that opportunity because they've had some already. But I do think it's definitely important to look at each case, each individual, and make the best decision for that. But I agree that non-monetary bonds could be utilized in a higher level, especially when we're looking at the current state of the economy and how people are able to function and pay for things.
And yet those decisions about, when you're in first appearance court, those are almost split-second decisions that you have to make, one after another after another.
Yes.
How do you think on your feet that quickly?
Well, again, it's about gathering information, right? So if you don't ask the questions, you don't know. So I think it's important, again, to ask those questions from the bench and to inquire of a person's circumstances, not just of their monetary circumstances, but again, what does your household look like? How is this going to affect the people around you, and still again balancing the community, because if this person has been arrested, is there a victim out there that also needs to be protected? So not just looking at this person and their situation, but also the victims and the community. And again, making sure that public safety is top priority, but giving some compassion where it's due.
Well, Shayla Lee, she is running for the Group 9 county court position. The election is November 5th. Everybody should vote regardless of how they vote. Thanks so much for
Absolutely.
being here, Shayla Lee. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Up next, a galaxy merger that's eons in the making.
Scenic Jacksonville presents the annual Great City Symposium on October 10th. Speaker Carol Coletta has led the transformation of downtowns, parks, and riverfronts across the U.S., from Memphis to Chicago. Join the community conversation. Tickets available at scenicjacksonville.org. Ullman Wealth Partners provides personalized solutions and guidance in investment management, advanced planning, and relationship management. Committed to delivering exceptional service and building long-term relationships based on trust, transparency, and integrity. Proud supporters of WJCT and the news it provides to Northeast Florida. Learn more at ullmannwealthpartners.com. Our discipline, your freedom.
On the next Fresh Air, actor Uzo Aduba. She's best known for her role as Crazy Eyes on Orange is the New Black and for HBO's In Treatment. She'll talk about growing up the daughter of Nigerian immigrants in an almost all-white Massachusetts suburb and pay tribute to her mother, who died while Aduba was writing her new memoir. Join us
today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
You don't have to give $1 billion because every dollar counts when you donate to this station. Please make your gift today. Thanks.
Please call 353-9528 or visit us at wjct.org/radio.
Almost no other creatures are as universally despised as rats. Last week, New York City held its first ever National Urban Rat Summit in hopes of addressing the city's chronic rat problem. But what do we miss when we only treat rats as pests? Rats and what we get wrong about them. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
And we're back. It's an astrological merger 4.5 billion years in the future. Or is it? Here to tell us about this potential galaxy collision is Eddie Whistler, our resident spaceman and planetarium director at the Museum of Science and History. Hi, Eddie.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
So we've heard this is a done deal. There's a merger coming, the Milky Way, Andromeda Galaxy.
Yeah. And so this is the time of the year that you get to look up and actually see it, but you have to work for it.
What can we see?
So we can see Andromeda. Andromeda is the farthest thing in the universe that you can see with your own two eyes. Go ahead and, use binoculars, use a telescope. Now, all of a sudden, the universe is open to you. You're going to see things that are way farther away. But with your own two eyes, I don't care how far you've ever seen anything on the horizon or in the sky, whatever, Andromeda is the farthest.
It's a separate galaxy.
But like I said, so a galaxy is a storm of stars, right? Our sun is to a galaxy what a raindrop is to a hurricane, right? And almost in the same numbers, as crazy as that seems. And when we look up at the nighttime sky, we see the next door neighbor raindrops that happen to be in our little area of the storm with us. And we're all traveling around the galaxy like central hub. We look out just inside of the constellation Andromeda, just beyond, just outside of Pegasus, the Great Square, which just starts to make itself visible in the nighttime sky now. And you see a smudge of light, great, a smudge. How interesting is a smudge? It's really interesting if you know much more about it. And so that smudge, when you resolve it through much better instruments than your measly face telescopes, then all of a sudden we see it for the great storm of stars that it is. It's our next door neighbor, major galaxy, the Andromeda Galaxy.
And because it's fall. Is that kind of when we have peak viewing season of Andromeda?
Yes, and it'll only get better. But like I said earlier, you have to work for it. And so what does that mean? Well, you have to get away from the city lights, because I promise you won't be able to see it. How can I promise? Because I've tried to see it myself from my own backyard. And I feel like I've seen a phantom of it, but it could just be that. I could just be imagining.
Where do you go to get away from the lights?
Yeah. Where do you go?
I mean, really, there are some places towards Ocala, I guess, that are.
Yeah. So the best place, like you really want dark skies and you're willing to work for it, then you go to southern Georgia, the Stephen C. Foster State Park at the Okefenokee Swamp, and you get the darkest skies that you can be afforded. There's other places in Central Florida that, near the springs, and you go on a camping trip and you do the river thing on a canoe or something like that during the daytime, and then you camp out at night and you look up. Oh, it looks so good. Looks so good.
I want to ask you, though, about this collision. I don't
Yeah.
even know what it means for galaxies to collide. I mean, is that on track billions and billions of years from now?
Yeah. So, if you're a patient
Billions
person,
and billions.
so it's tough to say, like, when does a collision between two ghostly storms of stars begin? Scientists are looking right now to see if there's an exchange of stars that is already happening, but the main thrust of the entire collision will really take place in like 4 billion years or so. And it'll take many more billions of years after that for the whole thing to kind of settle out. This is what happens when you have two storms of stars just like heading towards each other.
So what happens? Are things colliding? Is it chaos? What's happening?
So chaos is a great way. And as a matter of fact, so I know that we're probably nearing the end of the segment, but I urge people to go online and check out. It's not an infrequent thing when galaxies collide. So we look up with our telescopes and we see these collisions happening out there in space. And what you get are these major distortions of the stars. Stars go spilling out into intergalactic space. Stars are just thrust out at speed. So now they're no longer even gravitationally linked to their host galaxy. We call those rogue stars. How cool is that? That's
Rogues.
such a great name. And so that's what happens. These stars just spill out.
So the next Mosh event, it's called How I Wonder What You Are, October 18th at 7 p.m. in the planetarium.
Yeah, come on, Friday night. How I Wonder What You Are. It's a callback to the stuff that we, heard when we were kids, but for adults, how do we wonder what is going on in the universe? Like, what is the process of science, and how is some really cool stories made themselves known in the astronomical world?
Eddie Whistler, it is always fun to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming on today.
It's always so fun to come out and chat with you.
Talk about the universe.
Yeah.
And all the space.
Next time.
All right. Thanks for being here. We're joined now actually by David Luckin. He's station manager. He's the host of Electro Lounge. We are in the midst of a pledge drive. It's that time of year, David. And we really want to encourage people, especially who listen to First Coast Connect, to contribute.
Absolutely. And here's the whole reason. The Fall Radio Drive is on now, and thanks to the generosity of the Ullman Wealth Partners, for every dollar you donate, they will contribute too.
Oh, double.
So we need 10 of you who enjoyed this program to call us right now at 353-9528 or go online at WJCT.org/radio and give what you can. We'd really like that $500 pledge today because it's going to be triple.
Yeah, that's great.
So we need your
deal.
support. And if you love this program, if you're a regular listener, you know this number. Now call 353-9528. You won't get our usual screener. You'll get a nice volunteer who will help you through the process. It only takes about 45 seconds, and we don't share your information with anyone.
David Luckin, thanks for being here. Please make
you.
a pledge if you are at all able. And join us tomorrow when we explore how drug or alcohol impairment can impact the rights of defendants under interrogation. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
The Museum of Science and History is hosting Lives Eliminated, Dreams Illuminated, a new exhibition from August 30th through February 2nd. Open to the public 6 days a week. themosh.org for more information.
This is WJCT News 89.